Welcome to another tech webinar here at Servoy. Great you all can join. Today Vincent has prepared a session on continuous build integration with Jenkins, which Servoy recently switched to, and that will start shortly. I will moderate the questions, which we will try to answer all at the end, unless it of course makes sense to interrupt Vincent's presentations. So let's now switch to Vincent. Let's start this session.
Okay, everyone, thank you very much. I hope that everybody can hear me. Thank you all for joining at the continuous build integration using Jenkins webinar. Today I'm going to do a couple of things, actually two main things. The first thing is to explain how continuous integration fits into a software factory. And second, I'm going to demonstrate how this is used with Jenkins as our new tool to do that. Before we were using the cruise control, which worked, but I can tell you that Jenkins is a much more user-friendly, much more UI-rich product we're using now. But to start off with this, I think the first thing we need to discuss is what is a software factory. Now, according to Wikipedia, a software factory is a structured collection of related software assets that aids in producing computer software applications or software components according to specific externally defined end-user requirements through an assembly process. Now, that's quite a mouthful, and if you also check the internet and you will check for the definition of a software factory, you will find a lot of articles, but it's very hard to get a really shorthand explanation of what that actually is. So I think the best approach here is to actually visualize that to explain what it actually means. So I've looked up this this diagram right here. Now this whole thing within these boundaries is actually a software factory. Now these are actually your developers, which are actually coding and developing the software, and they're actually committing their source code into any source repository. And here you might have a project manager or a customer reviewing everything and checking everything in their own project management and bug tracking tool. In our case, we're using Jira for that, for example. And then when you have all your code in your source repository, then when we're talking about continuous integration, you would have a server here which can pick up everything and then spit everything out and compile stuff, do the test execution, maybe check code quality, package, deploy, etc., etc. And from there, we're also interested in making sure that these code commits are all combined into a specific build, which will then be available on the test platform, as it says here, which is a platform, obviously, so that users can test that. Now, basically, this whole thing here is called a software factory. Now, that's the first thing we need to know. Now, if we zoom in to that a little bit, we are really talking about a continuous integration and then using Jenkins as the tool for that. But what is continuous integration? Again, according to Wikipedia, is the practice in software engineering of merging all developer working copies with a shared mainline several times a day. Now again, let's try to visualize that part again. So if we are looking into the same diagram here, then you can see that this particular part here is all part of the continuous integration process, where you have here a server which is actually going to get all the commits from developers and is then also able to compile it, to execute the tests, report back those test results, maybe check code quality and everything which is done here. Now also what is one of the tasks of continuous integration is to make sure that the code is compiled into a specific build and then will be available on a test server. But it can also be used to generate documentation and also analyze stuff and then report it back to any user which is necessary. Now, talking about continuous integration, if we take a look at the diagram here before, the tool which we are using to make that all happen is in this case Jenkins. As I told you before we were using cruise control, which was quite a nightmare, I can tell you, to make that work, but also to maintain it. And I have to say that Jenkins does a really good job in doing all that. What is Jenkins in this case? According to Jenkins itself, in a nutshell, Jenkins Continuous Integration is the leading open source continuous integration server. Built with Java, it provides 800 plugins to support building and testing virtually any project. Now, the nice thing about Jenkins is that it's based on sort of the same things as Servoy is. For example, Jenkins is cross-platform, so it can run on Windows, on Linux, on actually any platform you can think of. It's a Servoy, and it's utilizing Apache Tomcat, same as Servoy, and also AND. Now, AND is actually also a project from Apache and is being used to utilize command line tools to export, to generate and produce builds, and also to make sure that unit tests can be run in this case. Now, we're also using AND to make sure that all our projects can be exported for future use. Now, how can Jenkins serve you in this case? So what can it do for you, and especially also when using with Servoy projects? Now, in general, you could say that it can detect code commits from developers, could be from Subversion, could be from Git or whatever. It can prepare software builds, because then it fetches all the code out of the repository and then all compiles it into, in this case, in an export file. It can also run unit tests and also report its result in various ways. It can also trigger automated deployments. In this case, so you can make sure that an export file from Servoy can then be automatically imported into the application server, and much more depending on your specific needs. Because the nice thing about Jenkins is it supports a wide variety of plugins. They say it's about 800 plus. I didn't count them, but I can tell you it's really a lot. I just mentioned a few things that are supported by Jenkins. You can think of, in this case, Subversion or Git or authentication through LDAP. It also supports Selenium for UI testing, and also a number of Atlassian products. You can think of Jira, for example, or Confluence. It all supports that, but it supports much more. I will just show you in a minute the list of plugins. I will not really explain to you what all the plugins are, but at least where you can find them, so you can do a search if you find something which might be useful to you in your project. Jenkins and Servoy. In this case, what I'm about to show you is a specific workflow of how we have set up Servoy in conjunction with Jenkins. R&D has spent quite some time to make sure that it's very easy to use Servoy in Jenkins. We have prepared a lot of configuration files and everything that needs to be set up in order to properly use that with each other. And the way we have set it up is a bit like this. So I've set up a workflow to just show you a little bit the steps that are taken by Jenkins in order to produce a deployment build. And the first thing it actually does is that Jenkins is going to check if there are new code commits available. So it's going to check with Subversion or with Git or whatever. And then it's going to, if there are code commits, it's going to fetch all the code changes and export the solutions. And that's all being done by AND. So you also need an installation of AND on your Jenkins server, but that's also quite easy to do. Now, when that's done, then we also need a Servoy instance, which also runs on the same server as Jenkins, to actually import the solution into the workspace. That's all also being done automatically. Now, when that's done, it's going to check whether or not unit tests are available. If there are no unit tests available, Jenkins assumed everything is all right, fine and dandy, and it will then proceed with copying the exported solutions, which has been done here. Now, when there are unit tests, it will run the unit test and then publish the results. If the unit tests are successful, then it will also copy the exported solutions, and then it's done. Now, what it's doing, it's marking a specific folder as a build folder. So that means that if an export is done, if an export is done and it's being put into that folder, then we can assume that that specific build has been successful. Now, that's the whole part that that Jenkins and Servoy is then actually doing. As a next step, you would like to have the step where you could pick up that Servoy file, that export file, and then automatically import in that into your test environment. Now, that specific part, that's a bit outside of Jenkins, and that's something that we do through the Servoy application server. And for that, I have just a very simple solution, which is responsible for importing that solution into the application server. Okay, here are some useful links. I will show you that later. I will just leave it here for now. Maybe it's a good idea to make a screenshot here. The main website for Jenkins is this website here. And we have also made a very comprehensive tutorial about how you could use Jenkins and Servoy together for your own Servoy project. It also includes a sample workspace and a whole guideline of how to set it up. As I told you before, it's very easy to use Jenkins, and also the installation of Jenkins is really a piece of cake. And as soon as you have installed it, it's very easy to use it, as it all is being configured by using a web interface, just as the Servoy admin page. Now let's have a demo now to see what we can do with that. Now, what I've set up here is I have my development environment here with a very nice CRM. Let me start that solution for a moment. It's actually nothing more than just one form with some data. That's about it. That's my whole CRM, very extensive as you can see. And I've also added a module here, which is attached to the main solution. Now, this module has a global section which is empty, and also has a util section. Now, this util section has a method here which says return the sum. So I can pass 1 and I can pass 2, and it should return 3 as a result. Now, what I've also done is, based on this particular method, I've created 2 JS unit tests, and I put them right here. So the first one is to check that if I send 1 and 2 as arguments, I should have 3 as a result. Yes. The second one is to check, like, okay, if I'm going to call this method with 2 empty arguments, it also should return null. Yeah. Now, this is all also part of my project. Now, the reason why I have this is because if I'm going to execute some code commits, and Jenkins is going to pick that up, it will automatically see, hey, you got unit testing available. I will run it for you, and depending on that, if they are successful, it will just continue with the whole process, and if not, it will notify me that something is wrong, and it will just stop from there. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create some changes here. So this is my working copy, and I'm going to make some nice changes. Now, let's assume that I want to want to make some change here. So, for example, I'm working on this particular method, and I would like this to fail. Yeah. So I'm going to say this is my result. So as a result, at least one of my unit tests will then fail. Now, as soon as I commit my changes, then automatically these will be picked up by Jenkins. Now, let's have a view at Jenkins first. I'm going to my browser, going to my second tab. Now, when I log into Jenkins, it looks like this. And you start off with a dashboard here. And my dashboard is showing all my projects which I have set up. Now, in this case, I only have one project available. And when I click on this project, I can see the status of my project. Now, on the left side, you can see my build history. And it's also showing two dots. This one indicates that I have failed build, and the second one indicates that it was a successful build. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to commit my change, and then I'm going to see what's actually happening. Mainly when I'm a developer, I just develop, I commit my changes, and I really don't have to go here because I assume that everything is being done automatically. So it's actually very easy to use. So let me just synchronize with SVN now. So I'm going to say team, and then synchronize with repository. And I can see I have one change here. Now let me commit that change and see what happened. Changed, return some method. And I say OK. And that's all I have to do from a developer point of view. Now let's see what's going to happen right here. So the way I've configured my my project here is that it will check for code changes each minute. And then when it does, you will see that it will end up here in my build history. It will see that it's going to execute all the tasks that it needs to do to run the unit tests and check everything to make sure that it can be available on the application server. Now, I still have to wait for this, so let's resume with other stuff that I have in place right now. On the same server where Jenkins is currently running, I also have a test environment available of Servoy. And this is my my admin page. As you can see here, if I click solutions, I have one release of my CRM right here. In this way, I can also check what my latest release is, and then if my build is correct and my unit test passed, I can see that then next version of my solution will be imported. Let's go back here. Now, as you can see, Jenkins is currently working because it found code commits, it found changes. So it's now actually working on fetching them, exporting them, starting an instance of Servoy, importing everything, and then run the unit test. That's step one. So it's doing that. And as you can see now, I have a problem because the build has failed. Now, what's nice about this is that automatically I'm getting notified through email with this. And as you can see here, it's quite an extensive email, and it's actually describing all the steps it has taken to come that far. Now, we're not really interested in most of the things, but if I scroll down here, for example, you can see that I have some results regarding my my unit tests. Now, this is all very descriptive, so let's just go back to Jenkins and have a look there. So I'm going to click on a build. And here I have an overview of some of the log files that Jenkins has produced. And now, if I click this, for example, the JSUnit no frames.html, I get a nice overview of all my unit tests that that Jenkins has run. And as you can see here, I have 2 tests in total, and I have 1 failure. And you can see here that the first one, test return sum1, has a failure. It says here the sum of 1 and 2 does not return 3. Well, that's correct because I have added 1 to the return, so actually returning 4 instead of 3. So that's absolutely correct. And what I'm also not having here in my email box is a notification from the import solution solution that I've made to actually import the solution to the application server. Because as soon as that is done, I will also receive a notification. And when I go back to my administration here and I refresh my page, I can see that still the same release is active. Now, in the same test environment, I also have a test version running here which is just a copy of the of that CRM. Now let's make some changes to correct the thing that I've screwed up, and let's also add another field called fax number, and also put that on this particular form. So I'm going back to my development environment. Now the first thing I'm going to do is, I saw that this JS unit test failed, so I just have to go back to the drawing board and correct that return sum method, because I screwed up. And I see that I made a big mistake here. I added 1 to the sum, which is absolutely not correct, of course. So I'm going to remove that. So I'm corrected this one. And what I'm also going to do is, in this particular form, I'm going to add a fax number. And for that, what I need to do is, I'm going to the CRM database, I'm going to the customers table, and I'm going to add the fax number. Okay, added that. It's very nice. I'm going back to customers, and I'm going to add that to my form. Okay, I'm going to make my form a little bit bigger. Let's make it 750, for example. And put it here. Now let's make it a little bit bigger here. Like 800. Why not? Okay. Now let's restart the local client here. As you can see here, I now have a fax number, and I can edit it. Very nice. Now, one of the things that that is new in version 7.3 of Servoy is that before we had a problem with the exports based on DBI files, because if we're going to do an import, or if Jenkins is going to do an import to run the unit tests, it also needs to make sure that the data structure is updated. And now we can make an export based on DBI files. So that's all being nicely supported. So that also means that if I'm going to do an import on the test server, then automatically this fax number column is added automatically. But let's see if that's actually happening here in my test solution, which I have running here. So what I'm going to do now is, I'm going to do another synchronize. And as you can see, I've made quite some changes. I changed my form. I have my module, which I corrected my return sum, and I also changed the DBI file here. So I'm very happy about that. So let's say commit, and say OK, and that's done. Now let's see if Jenkins likes that. So I'm going back to my results here. And then I hope that my next build is going to turn up blue again, because that would mean success. Now, as you can see, oh, it's very quick. So it's already building my my application here. And it also takes some time here to show you a little bit what you can see here as well. Now, if I'm in my project here, I can also directly view my workspace. So I can click on my workspace here, and I can see the content of my workspace. So, for example, I can see the metadata. I can see, for example, what's in my CRM. I can completely see everything here. I'm also able to even download the workspace in a zip file for local usage if you really want to. So that's nice. I can also see a list of recent changes that have been made. I can see here, for example, that I've changed the return sum method. This was the description that I've given to my change. So here you can see a complete list of everything that has been changed. And I'm very happy because I need to refresh here, because I see that my build was successful. Now, if I now take a look at my my email here, I can see that the Jenkins build is back to normal, and as you can see here, it's sort of an empty email, and this usually indicates that it's actually a good thing. And what I also like is that it says here, solution import has been successful. Now this is a message that I generate myself from the Servoy application server after I have imported my solution. So if I go back to my Servoy admin page of my test environment and I refresh my page here, then I can see automatically that I now have 2F as my active release. So that's great news. Now let's see if that really happened. So let's close, reopen the solution again. As you can see now, I now have my fax number. But it's not only in my form, it also changed that in the database. So if everything goes right and I enter some value here and I press F6, that should be fine. So now it's saved as well. Okay, now so this is a little bit how that works, and I think especially in projects where Agile and Agile Scrum is being used, this is very handy, because usually when tests are included into the sprint, usually that means that you have to prepare a lot of builds, put them on the test server, prepare that, etc., etc. And if you just do that once, it will take you maybe 15 minutes or half an hour. But if you have to do that every day or multiple times a day, that's really time consuming. And if you can do it like this by setting this up once, well, then it's very useful. Now let's go back to Jenkins again. Let's have a quick look at the features here, or a bit of the features. So if you take a look at this, this is your main page, and from here you can switch to your projects. In this case, I simply have one project, but from here you can say, for example, manage Jenkins. Now, and if I go here, the two things I mainly use to really set this up is here, configure the system, and the other one is manage the plugins. Now, if I go to configure system, these are just global settings which I can configure. And without getting too technical, things that you have to set up here, for example, are an installation of Ant, because it needs Ant to actually make sure that it runs unit tests, export solutions, etc., etc. That's important. It's also important to localize a JDK installation, because Jenkins is built with Java, so it's also using a JDK by the way. So not a runtime environment. That's not sufficient. You really need a development kit in this case. And what you also need to configure is the Jenkins location from the outside. So the URL that's being used from the outside. You can also specify a system admin email address that's being used to send notifications about the system. And also about email notifications, what you can configure here. And if you go to advanced, for example, you can see the complete setup of how to connect to any email server, in this case through the Servoy account. So basically that's what I've set up globally. Now if you go back and we take a look at the plugins here, for example, which can be found here, so by manage Jenkins and then manage plugins, then you can see an overview of the plugins. Everything is divided by updates of the already installed plugins. Also an overview of all the installed plugins. Now, all these plugins are installed by default. I think the only thing that I've installed manually is the timeout plugin. Not sure where to find it here, by the way. But that's a plugin to make sure that if your build is taking too long or is countering errors, that it just stops it in a considerable amount of time. In this case, 3 minutes. And you can also have an overview of the available plugins. Now, watch my scroll bar here. You can see that it's really a big list. And everything is divided in the types of plugins. So I have artifact uploaders, I have authentication and user management plugins, I have build notifiers, etc., etc. So this whole list is massive, and no matter what you're doing, I'm pretty sure that you can find at least something that is useful in your project. So wow, it's massive, it's really massive. Okay, Let's see. I think in general, if you then go to my project here and see what has been configured here, again, without getting too technical here. So if I go back to my my project, I also have an option here to say configure. And if I go there, I can configure my whole project. Now, the nice thing about plugins is this, that if you install a plugin, you don't have to go to the physical server and install a plugin there. Everything is being done by this web interface. So when I decide to, for example, install a Git plugin, for example, then it will automatically show up here where it belongs. So at your project configuration or your global. And in this case, because I have Subversion plugin installed, it will just end up here as a selection with all these properties that I can set. Now, the way that I've set up my project is that it's actually listening to the whole repository. So I have my CRM as my main solution and a module as a module, and maybe I have 10 other modules. Now, as soon as one of these modules change, this will automatically result in the building of one specific module, which is the CRM. Now, if I go here, for example, a little bit down, I have here a build section. And when I click advanced, I have a few settings that I can set. And one of the things is, for example, smart test solutions. Now, if I would like to make an automatic build of multiple solutions, the only thing I need to do here is say CRM and maybe ERP, if that's also a main solution, and it will also generate a. That's all very nice and very easy to configure. Now this stuff, what you can see here, like post-build action, well, don't worry about that too much because that's all being configured by us. You will find everything like that from the tutorial that I've just shared you the link with. The same thing with the published JSUnit result and stuff like that. Just copy and paste, and everything just works out of the box with that demo version that we have shipped. Let's see, is there anything else to mention here without going too technical here? I think I've shown pretty much everything. I think it might be time for some questions if there are any. Ron.
Well, there's one question. Can you tell a little bit on how then the solution is imported into Servoy in the test instance? The last step.
Okay. The last step. Oh, you mean in the test environment? Okay. Now, as I showed you before, what's actually happening is that when we take a look at this this workflow diagram, as I told you that as soon as Jenkins runs the unit tests and indicates them as passed, it will just copy the solution into that folder. Now, what I've done is, if I take a look at here, I have just a solution called import solution, and I start this as a batch processor. And in this batch processor, I'm just sending a few arguments. So, for example, what is the URL of the admin page? And we're using that to actually use our API to do the import. So I'm actually loading the admin page. I'm starting up the solution import page. I'm making sure that I check all the options that I need to check, and I'm also making sure that I send basically this local file. So it's watching this file. So if it sees like, hey, the modification date has been updated, then it says, okay, well, then I need to do another import. And currently I've set the import, because I'm very impatient, to 5 seconds, but you can also make it 30 seconds or whatever. This is something that I've made myself. If you guys want, I can make it available somewhere on Dropbox or whatever, but it's fairly simple. And this will just execute the import. It will check if the import was successful, and when that's the case, it will send me an email message indicating that the import was successful, as I just showed you in my mailbox previously.